My dear friends, Matthew chapter 25 from verse 14 to 30 is our gospel passage. This is where Jesus tells his disciples the parable of a man who, before embarking upon a journey, decided to entrust his servants with his possessions. The text says that to one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to the third servant he gave 1. It is interesting to note that each was given talents according to his ability. Now, what did they do with the talents? The person with 5 traded with it and got 5 more. The servant with 2 also made another 2. But the servant with 1 talent dug a hole in the ground and buried it. Now, the text says that when their master returned, upon hearing how the first 2 servants had traded with the talents and made double in proportion to what they were given, commended them for their faithfulness, and as a form of a reward, added to their responsibilities. But with the third servant, the master was angry at his failure to use the talent to gain more. He therefore commanded that the 1 talent he had be taken away and given to the person with 10. And the servant was to be thrown into darkness, where there will be wailing and a grinding of teeth. From this parable, I wish to share 3 points. The first point is that we have been entrusted with talents. It is wonderful to acknowledge that the man trusted his servants to the point that he could entrust them with all his possessions. And as the text says, each was given talents according to his ability. Now, it's interesting to note that a talent in the days of Jesus was a laborer's salary for about 15 to 20 years. This is why the level of trust which has been reposed in the servants may be puzzling. This gesture by their master was in fact gratuitous. They did not deserve it. It was an act of generosity. It was an act of magnanimity. And it was extended to all, that none was left out. With this in mind, all that Jesus would like his disciples to appreciate, and then by extension, each of us, is that God, who is rich in goodness and mercy, has blessed each and every one of us with at least a talent. This is the truth, that you have a talent, that I also have a talent. So for those of us who each day are full of lamentations because we feel that there is nothing to be proud of, we must wake up to the truth that God has given us talents freely and generously. And though unworthy, we all have something. It calls for gratitude to God for his goodness. 2, recognize and use the talents. That the man gave each of the servants talents, so has God not left anyone out in the distribution of talents, in the distribution of gifts. It is therefore important that we identify our talents. Each has been given talents according to his ability. So we need to recognize what we have been blessed with. Unless we do this, we cannot use them. The question, therefore, is, what are our talents? Do you know your talents? Do I know my talents? While thinking about the question, it is worth remembering that since the 15th century, the English word talent has meant giftedness or skill. So while some may be gifted or may be talented, for instance, with singing in the church, Others may have the gift of service, like decorating the church with flowers or ushering during service. Whatever they are, they must be used for God's glory and honor. And on this note, I wish to quote St. Peter when he says, each has received a gift. Use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's varied graces. Whoever preaches, let it be done with the words of God. Whoever serves, let it be with the strength that God supplies, so that in all things God may be glorified through Jesus Christ, to whom belongs the glory and dominion forever and ever. Amen. 1 Peter chapter 4 from verse 10 to 11. The talents have been given for a purpose, and as good stewards or servants, we must do exactly that. The third point is the day of reckoning. When the first two servants reported how they had used the talents, the master was happy and described them as good and faithful servants. Once we use our talents as expected, we shall receive our reward. The third servant, on the other hand, failed to use the talent according to the expectation of the master. He went and buried the talents in the ground. The point here is this: if that were a better option, the master wouldn't have given him the talent in the first place. The master himself would have buried all his possessions in the ground, which was the safest place to keep money in ancient times. However, he did not do so. Our judgment will be based on how we use the talent that God has given us. It is worth noting that if the servant had also traded with the one talent, he would have been described as good and faithful servant. This means that the master wanted him to limit himself to only what he had received and worked with it. It is important, my dear friends, that as disciples of Jesus, we learn that faithfulness is required even in small matters. Once we are faithful in using that one talent, God will bless us. Unfortunately, some of us remain ungrateful about the one talent. We compare ourselves with others with many talents and begin to feel insignificant or inferior. At the end of the day, we fail to work with the one talent. We bury the one talent. Each day, we complain about the fact that we do not have enough like others. This way of thinking, this way of perceiving things, leaves us with unnecessary pain and bitterness. As we know, all the fingers are not equal. Yet each is important when it comes to the proper functioning of the hand. We must not bury our talents. Rather, we must focus on what we have and use them accordingly. A story is told of this woman who often envied her friend for how much money the husband showered upon her. She became disrespectful to her own husband. But what she did not know was that the friend hardly got the attention of the husband. She, on the other hand, had a husband who gave her all the attention she needed. The only time she appreciated what she had was when her friend came to her telling her about her intended divorce, with the reason that her partner had no time for her. My dear friends, there is no need to be envious of others. If not, we lose what we have been given. It is possible that for a lot of us, we often focus on what others have and at the end, forget that we even have something to be proud of. And the more we complain, the more the talent is buried. Judgment from the test is based on what we have, not what we don't have. Therefore, we must use what has been given per the intention of the giver. This is the way to salvation. To conclude, God, who is gracious, has lavished us with gifts according to the ability of each and every one of us, to be used for his own glory and honor. Based on how these gifts are used, our end will be determined. It is therefore our duty to identify the talents and to use them per the intention of the giver. This is how we will help build God's kingdom here on earth. But once we focus on what others have, we lose focus and then at the end up burying our talents. This would not go without punishment. May God therefore help us to recognize and also to use our talents for his own greater glory and for our salvation. Amen.